last 4 days of this 4-day endurance march of 140 k's. Your pack was just filled with rocks, dombos, painted dombos, so that you couldn't discard them and then just fill them up before you ended. So you had all that sort of stuff for 4 days. Very little food. Water wasn't too much of a problem, but I did mine in November, so the heat there was too intense. And those temperatures going to well into the 40s. And it was quite strange on the last day. So we started our walk back from Makuti and ended up on the main road going into Kariba at a dam on the right hand side, and we'd done about, on day 4 we'd done about 18 k's, told to stop, take your packs off, check that the rocks were all in order, and then we had some sarnies. There was a truck there with some sandwiches and cool drinks and stuff like that. So we thought, okay, well this is kind of like the end. And they said, right, Wafa Wafa is 15 k's from here. You guys have got 2 hours to hit it. Those that don't make it off. We knew it was virtually impossible to do that. So, and pick these logs up, so 2 men to a log, and off we went. There were 19 of us still on the course at that time. And so off we went, and we ran about, I can't remember who I was partnering on the log, but we ran, God, it must have been a kilometre, and 2 instructors came out of the bush, and they just went, whoa boys, it's over, it's finished. By that stage you got so used to the officers talking shit to you and the instructors talking shit to you, trying to get you to give up and chuck the towel, and you didn't listen to a word they said, so we just carried on running. Well, ran for another 500 meters, another 2 instructors came up the bush and said, boys, this is really, it's now over. Drop your logs, congratulations. They came up, shook your hand, and I tell you, I just collapsed in the heap. I just took my cap, put it over my eyes, and said, a fucking good ball.
Sure,
so it was yeah, you couldn't believe it was over. We had this 23 days, and 2 of the guys, 2 of the 19, they'd run about 200 meters, dropped the log, and said, they gave up, got on the back of the truck, and that's how it ended up 17 of us passing. These guys have gone through the whole 23 days and chucked the towel in. Right there and there. They'd run another 300-400 meters. They would have hit the instructors and realized that it was over. They bombed out. Crazy. But yeah, and then we had a 2-day break. Allowed to go into Kariba. Got chucked in there. We were boated in there on the boat, on the Scouts boats that we had at Wafa Wafa. Spent a couple of days there, casino, and then back again. 14-day tracking course, the rat pack every 3 days, and then finished that, another 2-day break, and then came back for another 2 weeks of dark phase. And that was pretty much selection, but I ended up doing about 50 days of Wafa Wafa.
Dark phase was your pseudo training?
Which was required. You were required to do it on selection, but I never ever got involved in any kind of, in the true sense of the word, into pseudo ops at all.
If I can contrast that to SAS selection course, because I'm from Llewellyn, I signed up to join the SAS, and they said that I can't join the SAS until I've done an 18-week RLI recruit course, till I've passed out from RLI, because you have to kind of have a unit to be RTU'd to, you know. So RLI was going to be my originating unit, and I must say, after 4.5 months of RLI recruit course, you're pretty fit, because RLI recruit course itself was quite hectic, and So in the end, there were 3 of us from Intake 140 at Cranbourne Barracks that crossed the fence to go to SAS. It was myself and a guy who's no longer with us, Graham Peake. Graham later became the CEO of the South African Pathfinders. And Matt Lamb, who was KIA, I think in the Birchenough Bridge area. I think it was Friendly Fire. Matt Lamb, a Canadian, who was a good friend of mine. Of the 3 of us, Matt didn't pass that time around, but did go back for a second shot and eventually was badged C Squadron SAS. But Graham Peake and I both passed. But I remember the guy. It was the course was run by Captain Garth Barrett, and the sergeant on our course was Darryl Watt, and a Corporal Skippers. So Garth Barrett, Darryl Watt, and Corporal Skippers. And head of training troop at that time was a Captain McLean, Ian McLean. Yeah, lovely guy. Ian and I are still good buddies to this day. And so the first night they keep you awake. They made us go to the RLI swimming pool and play water polo all night. And the pool's quite deep, so you can't touch the bottom. You have to actually tread water all night, and you have no idea how tiring that is. It's just exhausting. And the next morning they stuck us in some vehicles and they rode us up to Inyanga. And there only have 5 phases. So the day 1, which you probably arrive there about 11 o'clock in the morning, and they split you up into groups of 5. In our group of 5, there was an RAR full lieutenant, there was a Rhodesia regiment second lieutenant by the name of Ray Despevel, and there was myself and 2 other guys. And the 5 of us, they gave 2 big logs, and they said, from here you've got to go, we want to see you at 5 o'clock this afternoon at Inyangombe Falls. So we had a map and we had a compass, and there were 5 of us, 5 FNs, 2 logs. Lieutenants were humming and hawing and everything, and I said, look guys, I got a suggestion. Why don't one of us carry 5 rifles and then 2 guys on each log? And they said, yeah, okay, that's a good idea. So off we go, heading towards Inyangombe Falls, not realizing that there's a different magnetic north in the mountains, so your compass reading is not actually true, if you know what I'm saying. So you think you're heading but meanwhile you should be heading. Then you get to like a ravine, which is like a 200 or 300 foot drop, and you think we got to go down, and then we got to climb up the other side. So you throw the logs over the cliff, and the logs go clattering down, and then you climb down, and then you grab the logs, and you got to try and find a way up again. And so you go, and it's like there's ravines all the time, And at about 6 o'clock in the evening, we still haven't arrived at the RV, but we feel we're close. You can hear the river. It's the Inyangombe River, right? So, and we're sitting down to just catch our breath before we make our final, realizing we're going to be punished for being late. And our punishment is a rock, which Darryl Watt signs his name on with a Koki pen, so you can't like change rocks or whatever, You got to produce that rock at the end of the selection. When Ray Despevel, the second lieutenant, says, guys, I've only got 4 rifles here. We've lost a rifle. So it's like WTF, Because you know what that's like in the army. That's like an automatic, that's like an automatic disqualification right there. So I don't know how or why or what, but eventually it fell to me to go back and try and find this rifle, which I eventually did. They had to wait for me. But now it's getting dark, and at the last place where we had our sort of a break, there was the rifle. So I managed to find it, and I managed to find them again, by which time it was completely dark. So we decided we can't go down this like escarpment thing to the river. So we decided to sleep there that night. It started raining. And the next morning, actually we only arrived at 10 o'clock the next morning, actually, at Inyangombe Falls. We were quite far off. So we were way below the falls. We had to track our way back up. And there's Sergeant Darryl Watt sitting. And then what they did was they interviewed each one of us separately. And they asked you questions about the other four guys. You know, what do you think of that guy? What do you think of this guy? What do you think? You know, would you, you know, is he a whinger? Does he pull his weight? Whatever. And of course, all your answers are confidential. So you don't know what the other guys have said about you, and they don't know what you've said about them. But that was the only leg where there was any teamwork required, because from then on, it was you're on your own. And then we had to make our way from Inyangombe Falls to World's View, which is speaks for itself. So the falls are down there. World's View is the highest point in Inyanga, apart from Mount Inyangombe. And again, I had to be there at 5 o'clock, but now I'm on my own, and it's now about 11 o'clock in the morning. And the other guys have left at like 5, 6 in the morning. So I'm way behind everyone else. And I start tripping. All I can remember is I arrived at the Troutbeck Hotel when it was dark, and I started making my way up to World's View, where there were a lot of holiday houses that were deserted and everything. And on the way there, this black guy appeared out of nowhere, and I know it sounds weird, but I actually felt that he was like an angel, because he said to me, "You going to World's View?" So I said, "Yeah, how do you know?" He said, "No, I'll help you." And for some reason, he took my pack. I gave him my rifle. And we sang Christian songs the whole way to World's View, the two of us marching together. He carried all my kit. And then when I got close to World's View, he said, "Okay, I've got to go now." And he gave me back everything, and he disappeared into the darkness. And I really felt, at the time, gee, you've been visited, you know. This, like a visitor's come here to help you, you know. But anyway, and I saw that there was quite a big ravine between where I was and where the other guys were, and it's now midnight. And so I decided to sleep in the garden of this deserted cottage. And as I didn't have a sleeping bag or anything. I had a tie and dye t-shirt with the sleeves ripped off. I had shorts, and I had veldskoens.
Looking double red.
And I had a rifle with one magazine that was taped up, okay? And so I cuddled up in the garden, and as I was about to go to sleep, I heard this leopard coughing, you know. You know how the leopards make that coughing sound? And I thought to myself, if I don't sleep, I'm going to die of fatigue. If I do sleep, the leopard's going to get me. So I think I'm just going to take my chances with the leopard, and I went to sleep. And the next morning I woke up, and I managed to get to the RV in time. So from the first RV, I received a big rock from Dawat for being late. Oh, and another rock for having a grain of sand in my rifle. He found a grain of sand. So I had 2 rocks from the first RV. The second RV, again, I got another rock for being late, because I should have arrived 5 o'clock the previous afternoon, not 5 o'clock the next morning. And I got another rock for, again, Darryl Watt found some dirt in my rifle, and I hadn't shaved as well. So I now had 4 rocks. By the end of the course, the rocks in my backpack weighed more than I did, seriously. And then from Mount Nyangombe, we had to make our way to the bottom of, from World's View, we had to make our way to the bottom of Mount Nyangombe. And it's not such a long distance, but you're forbidden to walk on the roads. And they actually have OPs to make sure you don't walk on the roads. And they have those Land Rovers, LeSabre kind of Land Rovers, going up and down, checking the roads, and they got OPs watching. And because if you walk in the bush, it's that thick, a kind of scrubby brush that it might only be knee high, but it's actually almost impossible to walk through. You know what I'm saying? And the whole time it was drizzling, and I was cold, and I was hungry. Anyway, I walked on the road, and I found an old dead tree, and I slept under that tree that night at the foot of Mount Nyangombe, shivering and covered with spiders' webs and everything. And the next morning, Darryl Watt gave me another rock. He said, "Van, I see you walked on the road yesterday. Here's another rock." So now we have to climb Mount Nyangombe from the bottom. We got 6 o'clock in the morning. And we have to climb to the highest mountain in Rhodesia, which is Mount Nyangombe. And we have to climb down again. Then we have to go 10 Ks along that road which runs next to the Pungwe River to Causeway Cottages. Okay? And you have to get to Causeway Cottages by 12 o'clock. So you've got 6 hours to climb in Nyangombe and do 10 Ks along the Pungwe Gorge. And like yourself, I found myself halfway up Mount Nyangombe and I had terrible cramp. I couldn't believe the cramp in my calf muscles and I actually at that point I gave up and I sat down. I made myself a brew and I thought I'm not gonna make it. But then after having a brew and having some tea, I thought, hang on, I'm gonna give it another bash. But now I've wasted half an hour. Okay. You know, I get to the top of Mount Nyangombe and I'm the last guy, and the guy at the top takes my name down and he says, "So Van, I see you've given up." I said, "No, Sarge, I'm gonna carry on." You know. Anyway, at the bottom of Mount Nyangombe, I started running. Now you should be able to do it with a fast walk, but I knew I had to run to get there in time. And I started running. I was lost by a long shot. But I think running with the rocks banging into my back, and I was singing some Christian song, like a chorus that was going around in my head, and I kind of went into a trance.
Onward Christian soldiers.
Something. I can't remember the. I think it was actually in Shona. It was Tifamba Munzira Yakaoma Kunemusha Wakudenga Tifamba Munzira. Yeah. I remember Shona from. I grew up with Shona, you know. Anyway, so the next thing I tripped and fell, and I hit my head on the ground, and I got up, and I was coming first, and Causeway Cottages were right there. And I got up and I shook myself off, and some other guy ran past me, and he came first and I came second. And then the next leg was apparently every leg that we did, the officers had to do more. They had to go further. So Ray de Spevel and the lieutenant from RAR, they had to do another K or two beyond what we did. So every single leg that we did, they had to do extra, more than the men, you know, than the other ranks. And the last leg was a leg, or the second last leg was a leg called Inyanga Gardens, which is very, very thick forest. And at this stage, Matt Lamb had bought a new pair of boots, and he had like steel toe caps, where they were like, safety boots. You know those safety boots, and unfortunately they weren't properly broken in. So he had terrible blisters, and in fact, from Causeway Cottages to the Inyanga Gardens. And all the old SAS guys said to us, guys, watch out for Inyanga Gardens. It's actually the worst leg of them all. Matt actually walked backwards for 20 Ks. He walked backwards because it was too painful for him to walk forwards. And he had blood oozing out of his boots walking backwards. And when we got to the end of Inyanga Gardens, they actually took him off. They said, sorry, Brew, and we arrived there at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, and they said this leg is not over. You guys have to carry on, and so we carried on for another 2 kilometers, and lo and behold, there they directed us. We'd arrived at Inyangombe campsite, and we thought the next day we had to do another whole leg, but they said actually selection's over. So they actually failed Matt 2 Ks before the end of selection because of his feet. Yeah, but Matt didn't give up. He walked backwards for 20 Ks with his feet bleeding. Anyway, at the end of at Inyangombe campsite, those of us who had passed were separated. From the guys who had failed. So we weren't allowed to talk to them. We weren't allowed to look at them. Don't look at us! You know? we were like the sheep and the goats. We were separated. And Daryl Watt came up to me and said, I want to see every single rock that I gave you. I had to take. I remember taking that pack off and feeling like I could fly. You know, it was like a feeling of
Red Bull.
a wonderful feeling. And I had to line the rocks up, and he looked at them and everything. And then Captain Garrett came to us and said, okay, pile into the back of this landy, and in our still smelly 5-day selection clothing, we drove to Troutbeck Hotel, and we marched we left our rifles at reception. We marched into the dining room where there were people dressed up for dinner and candlelight and waiters in white uniforms there, and a smelly bunch of, I think there were 5 of us that passed the selection. And we had a slap-up meal and a piss-up there, and it felt like heaven, you know, after being cold and hungry. And I know it was only 5 days compared to your 20-something days, but I promise you, it was a hell of a 5 days.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And
I think there was a pre-rev as well. Wasn't there a pre-rev, a week of pre-rev?
Not for us, no. Literally, when we walked across from Cranbourne Barracks to the SAS, it was that evening our selection started, and by the next weekend it was all over.